Hello, and thanks for joining me on another edition of Real Money Stories. I'm your host, Jason Butler, and today I've got a very interesting person for you. Stacey Lowman. Hello, Stacey.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Now, before we go on, tell us where you are speaking from right now, because this is part of the story, right?
It is part of the story. Yeah, I'm sat in the back of my converted camper van on a beach in the south of Spain.
Yeah, I'm already envious. So well done. No, that's good. It's pouring with rain here in Suffolk. It hasn't stopped raining since about 7 o'clock this morning. But we've all got sunshine in our hearts, right? And it sounds like you've got more than most people. Good.
And
Right. So tell us what you actually do right now, and then we'll go back to the sort of early days. How do you spend
sure.
your days?
So I spend my days kind of 50-50 work and play. So I'm 34, but I probably work about 2.5 days a week remotely at the moment. Some of that time is with a company called Escape the City. They're a startup who help people find and create work that they love. And then the rest of my working time is through my own business, Behaviours Money, which is all about financial well-being and supporting people to use their personal finances to tackle the climate crisis. And the rest of the time, it's living in my camper van and traveling around and wondering where I'm going to stay each night and exploring.
Sounds interesting. But I must say, and I'm not just saying this to big you up, you don't look 34. You look about 22. I mean, what? It's obviously working, right? So, I think if anyone's not sure about the camper van and traveling around and never knowing where they are, it's clearly working. So the good living is working well. So anyway, so take us back then. I'm always interested about the early experiences people have with, money, spending, work, that kind of thing. And I wonder what the early money memories that you can think of in your family and what you learned about money and the kind of role of money.
Yeah, interesting. So when I think back to my childhood, my parents were both very good at saying, we have enough, and let's also use money to make incredible memories. So I remember us spending enough on enjoyment and having amazing holidays with family and friends, but them also working really hard too. So I think I was fortunate where it was never kind of the pursuit of money at the expense of other things. There was always an element of enjoyment alongside, the kind of working hard, playing hard mentality. My dad was a financial advisor, but we never actually really spoke about it. Right. And it wasn't, I didn't go into money because of dad or anything like that. I never made that connection. And then at school, I went to a state school, and I just happened to be one of the kids who got really good grades, and was one of the few that was encouraged to apply to go to Oxford for university, which I didn't get into. That's another story. But I think at school there was a sense of, Stacey, you should take this direction. Stacey, if you're getting good grades at this school, then you should be looking to move into a career where money is a measure of success. Wow. So from like my education experience, I was definitely pushed down the road of go to a good university, study economics and business, go into the finance world because you have the brains for it. And I think I was just kind of accepted that. I didn't look at the alternative lifestyles too much until I was like in my mid-20s, really. So I did a very traditional route of studied business and economics at Warwick Business School, and then got a graduate place or at Citigroup Investment Banking in 2008, and then I had 10 years with Prudential and M&G in investment management.
Interesting. So your dad was in the finance sector. Your mum sounds to me like she was very into, you having enjoyable experiences. But I'm just trying to think, what did you learn about money when you were observing your parents leading up to when you went to uni and then the workplace?
Yeah, I think I learned that money helps. Like,
Right.
it is not the goal in itself. Make sure that you have enough. Respect the role that money can play and what it can give to you, and work hard for it, but don't let it overtake everything else. So remember what money is for, and that's to give you meaning in other ways.
So begin with the end in mind, in the sense it's a means to an end, not the end in itself, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, before we go to the uni thing, did you in your peer group, because the danger period for a lot of people when they're forming money beliefs, not only are they observing their parents, but they're also observing their peers, and there's that desperate need as a teenager, isn't there, to fit in and be connected and be, sort of not stick out often. Did you observe big differences in wealth and spending, consumption, and all that kind of stuff, or those that did little side jobs and those that didn't, as you were growing up, amongst your peers?
Yeah, definitely. I went to a state school where where the catchment area it covered a relatively middle class part of town and then a very deprived part of town. And I'm sure, like, from memory, there was even like a panorama about the two areas where I was from, and like the disparity between them from a financial perspective. So I had friends at school who had very little, and then I had friends at school who had a lot. And I kind of I had experiences and friendships from both sides. So I really appreciated how much money can support you and give you opportunities in life. So I think I've always respected it and been very grateful for it, and always wanted to make sure I have enough. And then, as part of moving into this van life, I did plan for it financially. And I think that is because I've always understood and appreciated how important money can be in terms of the opportunities it affords you.
Mm. So, I'm interested to know what you learnt about money from your university experiences, because we know that there can be a wide range of situations that occur with uni, isn't there? Some people breeze through it, like my daughter came out with no debt. She never had any idea of spending more than her £90 a week. But her friends used to look at their statement and say, I don't know where all this money's gone to. And she said, well, it's because you bought everyone a round of drinks in the bar last night. Don't you remember? No. Or it is a complete train wreck, as you know, and they're wondering, like, what's happened. So where were you on that scale, and what experiences did you have at uni with money and spending and learning to sort of control your own situation?
Yeah. So at uni, I had the student loan. It was before all the changes to the student loan. So I think I came out with about 13 grand of student loan debt.
That's when you used to get the living costs were grants, not loans. Yeah.
And my parents paid for my rent, which was great. So I was very much maxing out my overdraft each term, but I had part-time work. I always knew I wanted to travel during my summers, at least for a part of my summer. So I worked alongside my studies and during my university breaks, so I could afford to travel. So apart from my rent, I did financially support the rest of my university days. Definitely maxed out the overdraft. But yeah, I lived as a typical student. I didn't get myself in a lot of trouble in any way. I can't remember I've never been a big drinker, which I guess is the biggest spend for a lot of students, and like the socializing element of it. Thankfully, I am very petite and a lightweight, so that was never something that I spent a lot of money on. And I was a campus university, so I didn't have a lot of the city temptations and spending in that sense either.
You came through in relatively one piece. I get it, yeah. But it's still one of the things as young people find really tricky, is just understanding how much food costs, right? Because they think it's, when they're living at home, it's just the fairies fill the cupboard up, right? Yeah, our daughter keeps coming back. She lives with her boyfriend half the week and comes back to us half the week. And then she says, "Oh, there's nothing to eat in here." So that's because you're eating it all. I said, "You," and it's the reason she comes back is I think washing and food, but that's another story. So you left uni. I know you said you did trips and you were working on the side, but when you finished uni, did you decide to have a gap year, or did you go straight into work, or what did you have a master plan, or how were you approaching it as you left uni in terms of this whole idea of earning and spending and making your own way in the world?
So I already, Warwick Business School was really competitive in terms of you've got to get a place on a graduate scheme. So I'd secured a position at Citigroup to start in the September after I graduated. So I only had a couple of months between the end of my exams and then starting my first job. So I went traveling for like 5 weeks of those. But then before I knew it, I was starting at work. So I always, like the last couple of years of university, that was always the path that I was going to take. And I think that was really influenced by my peer group in the university that I went to, that I never really considered anything else until about 6 months into my work, when I was really unhappy and I was thinking, gosh, is this everything I'd worked hard for, and this is meant to be the reward, and it doesn't feel like a reward. And it was only then that I started questioning it, really.
So you went into a graduate job, you started earning money, and what were you living in London at this stage, or were you living in digs, or living with parents? How were you sort of coping with the whole, surviving stuff?
Yeah. So the time I was earning most was when I was actually the worst with my money. So I moved straight to London. I was working in Canary Wharf and living in Camden and paying my own rent and everything for the first time ever. And I was working like 100 hours a week, like most weekends, working until midnight, like proper investment banking stereotypical career. So at the time, money was my compensation for working so hard and being quite miserable at work. So I was spending money on taxis everywhere because I just didn't have the time to spend commuting. Buying every meal out because I was never at home to cook for myself. And then at weekends, I was kind of shopping to make myself feel better about being quite miserable in the week and kind of falling into the retail therapy trap. So it was the time that I started on a very high salary for a graduate position, but I was spending all of that and more to make up for feeling relatively miserable.
That's a really interesting point because, I don't know if watched anything I've done or read anything I've done, but I teach that it doesn't matter how much you earn, if you cannot control your spending and your spending is not aligned with what's going to make you happy and also, keep you straight on the straight and narrow, you'll never get ahead. So, tell me a little bit more about the unhappiness, as far as you want to, about kind of what was it about the work that was making you unhappy, apart from long hours? Was it just not fulfilling work, or was it just the people you were with, they were a bit one-dimensional, or was it you were missing your family and your friends, or I don't know, what was it about that work, apart from, the money clearly wasn't enough compensation? What was it taking away from your happiness, apart from obviously being paid every month?
Mm. Yeah, I think the main part was that it was all encompassing. I was at my desk by 9 a.m. and midnight was an early leave. So I didn't have time in my life for anything else. So, and the ripple effects of that are you're not looking after yourself and your other elements of your well-being. I didn't have things that I was doing to talk about with my friends. I didn't have time to see my friends and family. So just not having any time and feeling genuinely exhausted. Like I collapsed in the office twice in the first 6 months just because of exhaustion. Um, so just how much time it took up and the ripple effects of that. Also, the work wasn't that fulfilling for me. So I loved the intellectual challenge, and I was clearly working with fascinating people from like an international team. obviously the work is really intellectually stimulating, and it was in September 2008, so during the credit crisis. So being in Canary Wharf every day when huge banks were collapsing overnight, and like the team around me was cut in half whilst I was there. So being so close to the action of a huge recession was really fascinating. But then I was going to work in a spreadsheet on a very specific financial model, which wasn't really my jam. I much prefer kind of the bigger picture thinking and the strategy stuff. And it was also a really cutthroat environment, and I'm just not a very cutthroat kind of person. I'm very small, petite woman. I look very young for my age, and I wasn't prepared for the level of cutthroat and competitiveness of that culture that I was kind of thrown into. And it took me a while to accept that that doesn't mean I'm a failure. That doesn't mean that I can't be successful in some area of financial services. It just, that culture didn't suit me and my strengths.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. People underestimating you, or you feeling that perhaps there's a bullying culture. I don't mean bullying you, but there's that bravado. There's that very male testosterone, even from the women, kind of thing. But there's an interesting research that shows, or various bits of research. In fact, I'm writing about this in my new book. Is that when people don't feel safe and they don't feel secure in their own skin, they perhaps don't feel loved, or they need validation from external. That validation can take all sorts of forms. So it could be spending, it could be addictions, it can be striving for success, status, money, recognition, whatever it is. And it's that insecurity, and it can be channeled. That's not write everyone off who's listening. If you've got some insecurities, I have. We've all got them, but if you don't recognize it for what it is, it can start overwhelming you, and then the worst version of you comes out as opposed to the best version, right? So that's probably, and you get a disproportionate number of people who've got that bent in those kind of environments. So whereas you normally, if you went to a party, they're not all jerks, so they're not all, unpleasant people. There's going to be a few, but you've gone to a situation where there's a concentration of people, and the environment brings out the worst in them. Interesting. So you were clearly unhappy, and you couldn't call time your own. That's another interesting point, isn't it, about happiness and fulfillment, is that if you feel you can exercise control over your time and you're connected to the output, then you can generally increase your happiness. That's why florists and gardeners are very happy people. So, okay, so you did this for what, 6 months a year? You collapsed a couple of times in the offices. Did the alarm bells not ring to you that perhaps this is not the right way to go?
Yeah.
Few signs.
I mean, I tried to fit in for like the first few months, and particularly as I was very conscious that my parents had funded me through university, and I felt like I owed it to other people as well to kind of stick this out and try and make it work. Thankfully, it was a 6-month contract that I'd signed, and then I'd also been told, it's good to show that you can stick things out, like on your CV and things like that. Like just get the 6 months to say that you'd committed to it for that long. So kind of 4 months in, I was like, this isn't for me, I need to get out. And then I started counting down, and thankfully I had that kind of 6-month get out clause. So I did it for 6 months, and then then looked at moving over to the investment management side, which you don't work such long hours, and the culture was a bit more aligned to my values.
So after 6 months, you moved over to the investment management side. Was there a big change in your financial package, or did it continue but wasn't going to rise as quickly, or what? Or was it, or you didn't care about that?
From memory, it was like £2,000 less than what I left the investment bank off, and with bonus. So I think with bonus, I still started with more than I was on at the bank. I'm sure my trajectory, had I stayed at the investment bank, would have been steeper over time, but the immediate impact financially definitely wasn't negative. So, and I'd also learned a lot of lessons from how I was managing my money when I was in investment banking. So like you said, I also wasn't spending as much. So I felt financially better off because I was being a lot more conscious with what I was doing with the money I was getting every month. So even though I had more time on my hands and I had like my evenings and my weekends to socialize, I was still kind of spending less because I wasn't seeking that fulfillment through spending my money, right? So financially, it was a good move as well.
Mm. So when you moved into the investment management world and you moved out of that toxic or rather unpleasant situation you're in, and you became a bit more mindful and spending a bit less money, did you start to sort of, did you appraise actually kind of where you were going with your life, the role of money in it, the role of what does success mean to you? Had you, or were you just pleased to be out of that and were just taking each step each day as it came with no master plan?
Yeah, I think it did take me a couple of months after I left the investment bank to tell myself that I wasn't a failure, like from wanting to work in financial services and still believing that there was a place for me somewhere in that industry, and also having worked so hard and been so miserable for 6 months and not having anything financially at the end to show for it. That was a really important lesson for me. So one of the kind of commitments I made to myself was think long term with the money that you're making when you start this position at the with investment management. So I put really good practices in place from the start. I started like saving my emergency fund, and then making sure that I was aware of the pensions and the share scheme benefits the investment company offered me, and to make the most of those. And I wanted to pay off my student loan before I was 30. I wanted to buy my own flat before I was 30. So I'd started thinking a lot more long term and putting good behaviours in place. And that's probably one of the things I'm most grateful for because of my experience at the investment bank. I think had I not worked so hard to earn money and then at the end not had anything to show for it, I wouldn't have learnt those lessons to be in the position that I'm in now.
Well, that's interesting. So it's not the case that you have missteps and go down blind alleys. It's that you learn from them and they don't hurt you too much along the way. Interesting you mentioned about not wanting to feel like a failure. And I think also perhaps feeling like you've let your parents down or other people down. But this idea that we make mistakes in our life and that somehow that makes us a failure, as opposed to we've just found one way not to live our life or one way not to run our money or one way not to spend. That's a big thing. And again, I write about this in my book, is that this, if you can divorce the identity of who you are with the mistakes you make and just put them down for what they are, I mean, they're just mistakes. They don't define you. They're just, you've got to make mistakes to learn, right? Ideally learn from other people's. But I just wondered, so tell me about that transition of your identity from that feelings that you had made missteps, and you'd done all that work for 6 months and sold your soul effectively and had no money to show for it, made it even worse. Then you transitioned to this being more mindful. How did you feel once you started making more intentional, more focused, more in control decisions and aligning your daily actions with that kind of direction you wanted to go?
I felt so much more confident and empowered, and myself, really. It definitely had positive knock-on impacts to who I was at work. I was valuing my time and my relationships more than I was valuing money. And I took a much more holistic view to what success looked like for me, and what a successful career looked like and what it afforded me in my life, much more than just the money. So yeah.
And that thing about working out what does make you happy and what keeps you, and the role of money, is that something that's continued to evolve because obviously you're 34 now, so over the last 10 years, does that continue to evolve? And is that something that you'd recommend for other people to keep checking in?
Yeah, definitely. It's always fascinated me, sparked by my own experiences, and then lots more of us now are talking about financial well-being and thinking about the role that money plays in your life, and all having a unique relationship with money. And I've now done a lot of kind of personal research and reflection on the role of money in my life. And I'm still learning about the role of money in my life, and kind of recognizing the stories I'd adopted from society or the industry I was a part of. Like, to be successful in your career, your salary needs to go up year on year, and you need to have like a straight trajectory of kind of income. That took me a long time to let go of, and especially moving into the camper van, it was always something that I wanted to do, but it was like, gosh, like this means that I'm not going to earn very much money, and does that mean I'm never going to earn money anymore, or are people not going to take me as seriously because I don't earn a certain amount of money? How am I going to cope being the one not earning the most in my friendship group anymore? Or what are my old peers who are still working in those lucrative jobs going to think of me? Will that change? And I had to unwrap a lot of those stories, you know, which has been a really interesting journey, and one I'm still working on. Like, I still have moments in the camper van where I'm like, oh my gosh, is anyone ever gonna like pay me a decent salary to do something anymore? So I still have those moments of doubt, but I'm learning to kind of not panic when I have those stories. I'm like, okay, what story am I telling myself? Think about like the skills that I've got, still do projects that keep my skills relevant, and I'm still opening doors for opportunities, and, you know, thinking that there's not one end goal here. Like, you've worked hard, and you're taking a break of sorts to enjoy time and relationships and those other things in life that you want to value, and trusting that when I need more money to come back into my life, I've got the skills and the know-how to do that.
That's interesting. So, I mean, what I'm feeling there is that obviously that illustrates the point that because money and materialism and status is easier to quantify as opposed to empathy, care, connectedness, balance, sense of meaning in your life and purpose, that's harder to quantify. So the easy route for humans is to look at the outward thing, right? Which is why mental health is a big problem for people, because they can't be honest about, you know, how they feel and what matters to them. So that's interesting. So tell me then about what the catalyst for the camp, first of all, how the camper idea came about, and how you managed to push yourself into doing that, because that's quite a big move, and it is a big move. But I actually, you know, as soon as I knew about you, I just thought this girl is going to be amazing to speak to, because you've done something most people would never do, which is not going to the moon, is it? But it's still out there.
Yeah, I'm definitely I definitely feel out there at the moment. So it's interesting. It's another story which kind of connects to money, actually. God, I'm really letting it all out there today. So I was single for a lot of my 20s. And I was seeing a lot of my school friends who were still like my close friendship group. When I was earning a lot of money in London, but having a more expensive lifestyle, they were settling down with a partner, buying their first house back at home, starting to have a very comfortable lifestyle. And I was, you know, single and fancy free in London with an expensive lifestyle, thinking, oh my gosh, do I need to be setting down roots? So I had this kind of solo female mission of, I need to prove that I can have that lifestyle as a single person. So I was like, okay, so to do that, I need to buy my own house as a single person to show that I don't need a partner to do that, right? So then that was this big mission, which I achieved, and I bought a flat when I was 29 in Brighton on my own. And then I got the flat and I was like, well, this is lovely, but I also really value independence and freedom. So when I got the house, I was like, that's really great, but I also need to know that I can still jump ship and go anywhere whenever I want. I've always had that kind of nomadic spirit. So then the house became, okay, so then I've got this asset. How can I use that to then give me more location freedom. So then I was working towards, I was still in investment management. This was in 2015, I bought the house, and I left investment management at Christmas 2018. So as soon as I'd got the house, I was like, right, I'm going to pay off slightly more of my mortgage repayments than I need to, so I can get a really good remortgage rate. And then I'm going to build an emergency fund of this much. I'm going to make sure there's this much in my pension. I'm going to value the house for rent, so I know that I can cover the costs of the house if I do want to leave it. And I want to make sure I've got this much in investments and savings. And I set really specific numbers for each of those things.
Really?
I made a promise to myself, as soon as my pension and my emergency fund and my investments and rental value and my mortgage is this much, that's when I'm going to have my notice in.
So hang on, this is fascinating. So you actually put pounds, shillings, and pence in the different pots. Let's think of it like jars above the mantelpiece, right? You know, metaphorically speaking. And the reason you were motivated to do the daily habits and decisions and behaviors and say no to things and perhaps go out a bit less was because you associated those numbers with you being able to be free to do the next chapter of your life.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd read things like Vicky Robin, Your Money or Your Life, and I'd been doing a lot of kind of personal finance research myself, and thinking about, okay, if I need to detach myself from measuring success by how much I'm earning, what other financial metrics can I put in place so I feel successful? And so the things I could control was how much I had in savings, how big my pension pot was, the value of my house, and all of that stuff. So I literally drew out, well, in an Excel spreadsheet, a net wealth table. And I was like, these are the things I want to have in place. And yeah, Christmas 2018 was when those numbers, I reached them.
I just love the intentionality that there's no messing around here. You're doing this, right? And once you commit to it, your brain does everything it can. It's like people, whatever you think, okay, it's not going to go in a straight line. There'll be a few detours, but you got there, right? So then when you got to this sort of December 18 and you could give your notice in, how did you feel? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, it was really exciting. It felt great. I mean, I bought the van in the summer of 2018. So I also had the van outside, and I was looking at the van every day, and I was converting it. So I was seeing that progress. So I had the dream as a reminder in front of me of what I was working towards. And yeah, it felt really amazing. Like, you know, you've made it happen, Stace. And I think those numbers really helped, because I, like everyone else, like with money, it's so difficult to say and pinpoint when enough is enough. And I did that, and I stuck to it, and I felt this just huge sense of achievement, which was great. And it was like, I felt successful, knowing that I wasn't going to earn very much in the next year. And that was okay, and being able to tell myself that was okay. So it felt really great. I mean, everyone at work thought I was crazy. They were obviously all like really fascinated by the story. And a lot of people did say to me, you know, I'm kind of envious, or I wish I had done that at your age, or taken a career break. And it's interesting how people react like that when you do something like this. But yeah, it felt great. Still scary, but enough, scary enough.
And also, you've gone outside your comfort zone, which is always a great thing. So, look, as we sort of pull things to sort of conclusion, I'm just interested what you've learned about the role of money and the power it often exerts over us, which we're not always aware of. We give it too much power, don't we? You know, I'm really obsessive about this thing about not letting money have more power than it should. What have you learned about your relationship with money and the role of money in the last sort of 2 years that you've been on this new chapter of your life?
I think that I've learned that, you know, money obviously is an enabler and obviously helps you achieve things that you want to in life, and seeing it as a resource to help you feel successful in whatever success looks like for you, rather than seeing it as the outcome or the measure of how successful you are. And trusting that there are lots of different ways for you to make money than you sometimes give yourself credit for too. So I'd worked in a bank for 10 years. Now I work for a startup, and I've started my own business, and I'm doing kind of courses and projects, building my skills and having the opportunity to make money myself as an individual person, rather than having someone say, here's a contract and you're now an employee and we think that we're going to give you money every month to do this thing. Creating money myself has just been like, wow, like there are like money can come into your life, and you have the skills and resources that you need to generate money in so many other ways than we sometimes think that we do. So trying to take the emotion out of it and being like, money is a resource and an asset that will be there. If you want to work to get it, you can do in more ways than you think you can, and then you can use that resource you can choose how you use that resource. So spend the time thinking about what you want money to give you.
Money wants to hang out with people who are ready to receive, and there's abundance everywhere. So you've proven that. Yeah. Look, Stacey, thank you very much for your time. I'm definitely going to include you in the final draft of my new book that's coming out, because I love the story. I think what you're doing is amazing. I'm really, really grateful you spend the time with us. How can people, because I know you now do courses, you've got various things going on. How can people find out more about what you're doing, perhaps work with you, hire you, get you involved in stuff, help you help them? Where's the best hangout joints for you? You're on Instagram, aren't you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Yes, I'm on Instagram at Pikira Money, and my website is www.pikiramoney.com. And I also work at Escape the City, so I can share those links with you.
Yeah, and we'll put those in the show notes. Look, absolute superstar. Thank you for spending the time. I don't know what the weather's like there on the beach, but check it out. It can be quite nice in October in Spain. It's still raining here in Suffolk, but as we always say, we've got sunshine in our hearts wherever we are. Stacey Lowman, thank you very much for your time. It's been wonderful speaking to you today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you want more money insights, do visit my website at jason-butler.com or connect with me on Twitter or Instagram at JB the Wealthman. See you next time.